All right, so we're recording, and all right, well, we can kick this off. It's high noon, and it's the Rhode Island Authors Expo, and we're in the world building session, building the world building and the wondrous. I don't have the title in front of me, so sorry about that. I'm Mike Squatrito. I'm the president of the association, as well as the Expo committee chairman and author of the Overlords fantasy book series. And on our panel today, we have Rob Bentley, goes by RK Bentley, and Angelina Singer. And they are two very, very good writers that we showcase quite a bit at our Comic-Cons. So Rob, why don't you say a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to Angelina.
Sure. My name's RK Bentley, and I wrote a book called Where Weavers Dare, and it's the first in a series. I'm working on the second one now. And you can, my website is rkbrights.com, and you can find all about my information there.
RKB what?
RKB Rights.
Oh, okay.
And Angelina?
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. I'm Angelina, and I specialize in young adult / new adult, sci-fi and contemporary romance. The primary example of my world building is in the Upper World series, which you can see behind me. I have a whole trilogy, as well as the first book, The Sorting Room. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook at Angelina Singer Author, and I do all kinds of events and giveaways and stuff. So follow me there for all the behind the scenes stuff. And currently I'm working on the sequel to my most recent book, Forgetting What I Couldn't Remember, and the sequel is called Forgiving What I Couldn't Change, and that's a time travel romance. So definitely follow me there for updates. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and like I said before, here come my books. Is 1, is 2, is 3, and here's 4. So you got 4 books in the series. And
paperweights, all of them.
Oh, they're book stock. They're door stock.
Very lethal weapons. No.
Yes, they are. So be careful of me in a dark alley. If I have my books, you're in trouble. So one of the things that we want to discuss today, obviously with world building, in fantasy and science fiction and in any kind of writing whatsoever, you need to have a world for your characters to live in. And I think everybody knows, I've mentioned before, I'm a big Star Wars fan. We have the baby Yoda here just in case.
Oh, cute.
I love him. He's got a name now.
He's got a name. Yes, he's Grogu, so he's here. And we all need universes and planets and worlds to live in. And a lot of writers that we have sometimes have a little trouble trying to figure all those things out. So hopefully today we'll be able to, have some questions answered for you. So what I'm going to ask our panel here, first question, what guidelines do you use when creating your world? Specifically, how do you keep things real? Either Angelina or Rob.
Okay, I'll start. Sure. How to keep things real. I in the Upper World series, as you can see, they're very dystopian, like Hunger Games, Divergent kind of styled. Keep things real. I kept my characters living in relevance to the real world, because it's a little bit futuristic in the sense that it takes place in a different realm that kind of exists outside of time. So when you have that compounded with the real world, it kind of is a nice little paradoxical expose on how to balance the two timelines and make it seem grounded in our reality while also being unique and different in a new world that I've kind of created. So I think blending those two elements is the key way to kind of attack that whole issue. But I'm just a big sucker for anything dystopian and kind of futuristic and different. So that's kind of how I do it, kind of blending the two worlds parallel to each other.
Okay, so with Where Weavers Dare, I have the characters going from living on a space station to a planet, and so keeping their feet on the ground, making sure that things, you have the environment, you need food, water, things like that, and so making sure that you keep it real enough where it actually cause and effect. So making sure that everyone is affected by the changes instead of just writing it off like, oh, okay, they'll get saved in a minute or something like that. So a lot of times there are events that it's they can't save themselves, and it's realism takes hold. So something like that.
Yeah.
How do you know how much detail to go into. I mean, look at the Harry Potter series, right? She made all that stuff up. But I mean, I think most people don't need to go into that depth, right? Or
Well,
well, what depth do you need? I guess is my question.
I'll take this one because I was going to follow up with the question there. What I usually do, and what I mean to keep it real, is we have characters in fantasy and science fiction that, we have Jedi Knights and we have the Sith in Star Wars, and in Lord of the Rings you have fantastic creatures like ogres, orcs, dragons, in elves, dwarves, whatever. What you want to do is you want to be able to have the reader say, okay, I agree that, okay, I understand that dragons don't exist, but I can believe the way the story's being written. My humans in my stories, they're human. They get beat up. If you fall from a cliff 100 feet, you are going to get seriously hurt or die. There's not things like that. So that's what I mean by keeping it real. I think one of the best examples I can give that I recall is actually the Batman. See, I think it's the Dark Knight Rising, the one with the Joker. And you forget, it is done so well that you kind of forget that these are superheroes and these supervillains don't really exist, but you buy into it. It's done so well. And I want to take things like that and have my readers and audience be able to believe everything I'm presenting to them. So to answer your question about how much do you put in, you really need to determine yourself. I mean, you are the author, so I always like to use the example of an iceberg. You only see the tip of the iceberg, but underneath can be a huge piece of ice. You probably want to give the audience just the tip of the iceberg and just keep feeding into that as you go along. So I think it all depends on what your storyline is, how you have your characters, and how it's presented to the audience. All right, so I got another question, but before I do, I want to give a shout out to Heather. My friend just came on from Hawaii, so awesome. Thanks for getting up early.
Wow, Hawaii. That's cool.
We're reaching the globe. See, she couldn't have came to Rhode Island today. So, okay, here's next question I have. What limitations do you put on your characters and villains in regards to magic and superpowers?
Interesting question, Mike. Well, in my trilogy, it's not really magic and superpowers so much as like tech, I think. For example, they have implanted devices that allow them to kind of like track each other and kind of keep tabs on different things, although it is expelled from their bodies after they've been on Earth for like a full day. So it's kind of weird, but like they do have that tech. They have some high tech in the upper world realm that allows them to kind of track what the human souls are doing and all that. So there's some tech, I think, but in some ways tech can be magic. So it really depends on how you define magic too. So I think that's the subgenre of sci-fi where it's like high tech versus magical fantasy because there's so many offshoots. So yeah, I don't know if that answers that, but that's what mine are anyway. So
well, what kind of limitations do you put on it? Like how far can they go before it becomes unbelievable?
Sure. I think as long as your world building supports it, you can go as far as you want. You just have to establish like understood norms and understood like ideas that make it feasible. So that's where the world building is like the biggest tool we have to make it make sense. Because you could have like flying unicorns going down the street as long as you say, oh yeah, it's typical in this realm, it's fine. Like nobody's going to question it. So it's really how you set it up, really.
Well, what I did with Where We Was There was the planet that they land on. One of them is a mage, and the planet itself is kind of an anti-magic zone of sorts. So what happens is the minute you say magic or technology, you think, okay, are we talking Star Trek type of technology? Are we magic? Are we talking Jedi? How high is it going to go? And so with kneecapping both the characters, one of them being the mage, it's his spells, he can do low-level spells, but nothing drastic. And with the other character is that she's actually wanted on the planet. So, making sure the characters aren't too powerful enough and giving that just enough of realism to, enjoy it. To at this point enjoy the scenes, and then to go from there with it. I think that as long as you find a balance, as long as you're not giving the characters too much power, because if you give them too much power, then you become Superman, and Superman is kind of invincible to a point. He's basically just guy in a cape, and he's nearly invulnerable except for the kryptonite, and that's really about it. With stories, you really don't want it to be too easy, but you don't want it to be too hard either. So as long as you find a balance, then I think that's kind of what the best thing to do is sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times I deal with the invincibility of characters. Do you give them enough to, beat the common person in the enemy, but you don't want to give them too much where they're invincible. And if they're invincible, then what's the point of, they can do whatever they want. So I like stories where people kind of have to really work at it. Like Han Solo, I loved Han Solo, and he got beat up, he got thrown, he put in carbonite, he had to be, he got taken all over the place, but he was a great character who had his abilities, but not over the top. So that's one of mine. One thing to let you guys know, if the audience has questions, you can always put it in the chat and I will be monitoring them. Or if you want to raise your hand for a question to one of us that on the current topic, I can see you online, so I can point to you there. So, okay, let's see. Here's one that's actually to deal with the actual world building. Do you methodically create your world, like make maps, charts of villages and towns, character sheets, etc., or do you build it on the fly?
I totally build it on the fly. I'm a chronic pantser, if you guys know that term in the writing world.
How do you do that?
I'm just crazy enough that it works. Well, okay. Actually, I think sometimes I do a lot of my plotting in my own brain. So I'm not like on the fly so much as just not writing it down until I'm writing the story. So it really depends on, like, do I have an idea? Can I make it like feasible? Can I put something together as I go? The plot, I sometimes will pants a little more, but the idea and the concept and the setting, I usually have a general idea and I kind of like tweak it as I go, or editing, you tweak it that way too. So I'm just weird enough that it works. I don't know. Maybe it's the hair. Who knows?
What I did was I'm sort of a pantser with Angelina, where I'll pants it up to a bit. But what happens is if you pants too much, then you write yourself into a corner, and then you have to then drop like 10,000 words, and that's like you put all that work into it, and then you have to do something else with it. With maps and stuff like that, I generally do it afterwards. So I'll write it and then I'll start making a map, because it's going to be a series, and so I want to make sure I've got something I want to be able to foreshadow stuff that's going to happen later. And so making the map later, and then putting down little points of reference and things like that, and doing that later. I haven't gone the full bore with putting it into the books yet, which is probably going to be the next thing on the list to do.
I think you're both crazy. I have, and my friend Kevin Duart will attest to this, I have maps and character sheets and pages of things and outlines and Microsoft Word bullet lists and putting everything in order. I guess that's my day job. I'm an engineer. So I have my analytical side that puts everything together in a logical order. And then I go off and my other side of the brain just goes crazy. As you can see, the dragons back here and stuff like that. So, but it is really interesting to see how some people can just go with what they have. Like Angelina said, just go with what they have. And it's, God bless you. I've tried to do that, and I write myself into corners, or I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where the people are, and all that kind of stuff. So that's unbelievable. Does anybody have a question on the creating the worlds or doing it on the fly? If not, yeah, Kev, unmute yourself though.
So when you say world building, because I'm writing a book now and I have some beta readers that are reading it, and it doesn't take place, it takes place on Earth, it takes place in modern time. And he made a comment and he says, I love your world building as far as the story's going. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not world building like planet building, like a whole different, like a Middle Earth or a Tatooine kind of thing like that. I'm building a world in the current on Earth that we build. So when people have like just the environment, when you say the world, are you actually talking always planets? Or are you just talking about the environment in which the story takes place? Because that has to be built too, because you can't let everybody assume that they know what's on, what, you know, if the story took place in Providence or Newport, you would still have to describe it to people, because when you have that person in Hawaii who probably has never been there, they have to know what's going on and stuff like that. So how do you differentiate between planet building and world building, or is there a difference?
Yeah, you make a good point there. The when I say world building, obviously, if you're building a Star Wars universe, you have to do that and everything. But if you're just writing a story, you need to keep it consistent as well. So, like we said, if you're in Newport, and I'm describing Newport, everybody knows Newport, Rhode Island's a seaport city, and it has its certain intricacies. However, if you say, well, I'm on the 110th floor on the high rise, well, no, that doesn't exist there. So you need to keep things factually straight. And you also need to know where everything is. If your characters grew up there, they're going to know the streets. They're going to know the stores they went to. They're going to know the parks they went to. They're going to know all that kind of stuff. So that in itself is part of the world building per se. You don't have to worry about the whole world. You just need to worry about where these characters are in the story, as well as some of their backstories, because that's what can be kind of interesting. Your supporting characters, your antagonists and their supporting characters all have a place where they've come from. So they all need to have a world or something that they've lived in, and that can be related to the readers. So that's why I say I need a lot of things to keep track of, especially not just worlds. I mean, I just read a Darth Plagueis on Star Wars book. I was amazed at the Star Wars universe that they put together for, it's kind of like how the Phantom Menace came to be, and went on for years and years and years, with different worlds and different beings and different characters. So that's on a whole different scale. But if you're writing something about a town and that's where the characters are going to be in, then you need to be specific enough for the characters and be able to be relatable enough for the reader. Let me see. I do have a couple questions in the chat. Let me see. All right. One person is asking, they're writing a dark fairy tales, and do you think that would require a type of world building? Anybody else doing things like that?
I haven't personally done that, but I knew somebody who did, and she definitely had a map kind of laid out. She did, it wasn't really dark fairy tale, but it was definitely magical realism in a fairy tale sort of middle grade setting. And so she definitely had sketched out a map, which I think can be helpful, although I haven't personally done that because I'm not really magical realism, but it can be helpful. I don't see why not if you like to do that whole sketch out thing, but I'm not personally a visual artist, so it's up to you. Go for it.
Yeah, I would say with any sort of fairy tales and stuff like that, there are so many takes on it. But I think that with world building, with that, I would definitely say sketch it, plan it all out in advance, because what's going to happen is that when you plan it out, it can also help with the plot as well, figuring out who's going to be the antagonist, who's going to be the protagonist, things like that. And I think that you don't have to go as deep as, say, like this the Silmarillion, or I'm going to mispronounce it, I know, from Lord of the Rings, where it's like, it's worse than Mike's books. It's it's like this, and
Worse.
and what happens is that it's all backstory. It's all backstory. And like, you don't have to go that far with it, but just enough so you know what you're talking about, and so at least it gives you some sort of glimpse into the world. It doesn't. Sean McGuire has done some has an ongoing series where it's all fairy tale type of magic. I can't remember the name of it, and my bookshelf is over there, but it's so much stuff, backstory stuff that she doesn't go into because it's a series. So you just add stuff on for later. But as long as you've got as long as you've got enough of a backstory to go with, then I would say definitely world build on the dark fairy tale.
Cool. I think that helps answer the question there. Anybody else have anything to add, or? All right, I got another questions for you guys. We're going to go to mythologies now. So, do you incorporate mythologies in your world building? Think like Star Wars, the Jedi and the Sith, and all the mythologies that go along with them, in things related like that.
I haven't personally done a lot of that. I tiptoed into it with this series. I think I mentioned like Titans, that kind of a subtle nod to mythology, but it was my own mythology. It wasn't like something that I took from. But I do love Greek mythology, and if you haven't read the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, I highly recommend it, because that's a really good example of kind of taking mythology and making it relevant to like real life, because those characters, yeah, it's middle grade, but at least it's something that makes it real and kind of tongue-in-cheek and approachable in kind of a fresh new way. So I haven't, but I love books that do, and I think Rick Riordan is a great trailblazer for that. So.
Yeah, as for mythology, really, because we're dealing with, or at least I'm dealing with outer space, there's really not much mythology, Greek or anything like that. But what happens is that there is backstory for some of the characters where it's been going on for a while. So learning how to peel the onion, I guess, so to speak, where you just give them just enough where the audience knows who likes each other, who hates each other. Because a lot of times the characters come from big families, and sometimes half the family got divided doing this, and either pro-war or anti-war, things like that. So it's like creating a mythology for the first book. As long as you know basically who to root for and who to hiss for, then that helps later on as characters evolve.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that, I think I mentioned this a little bit before with the iceberg analogy, where you actually have the reader see just a little bit, but you, the author, know everything else in the story. So I don't like stories that give you everything up front. I like to wait for it, see what happens. I always bring up Star Wars and stuff like that because I'm a big Star Wars guy, and they have tons and tons of mythologies going on in all different areas. And even, in other series that they've had, it goes off in so many different directions. And you can incorporate in that in your world when you're writing your story. And it doesn't have to be just fantasy or science fiction. You can do this in any kind of story. It's like Rob said, it's a lot of the backstory, but obviously with fantasy and science fiction, you can have all these twists and turns. Like there's a treasure. Okay, we're looking for this treasure. Oh, but by the way, there's an evil curse on it. Well, what's this evil curse? And they have to learn about what happened. And this was because some shaman didn't like what these tribes members said 500 years ago. And anybody who touched these jewels will die unless, and then you go down, so all these kind of things you can do and stuff like that can be given to the reader, but you don't want to give it to them all up front. You want them to find it out a little at a time. And by also keeping it real, you don't always let them succeed. So if something bad is going to happen, don't always let it be the Star Trek guy wearing the red shirt, where Spock and Kirk, Bones, and Rabinowitz go to the planet. Well, guess who's not coming back? Rabinowitz red shirt. That's too easy. But sometimes I put my characters through a lot in my stories, and it makes it more real that way. So that's why I say with the mythologies that it can enhance your storyline. It can give it another angle, and you can do things like that. Someone is asking, what are your thoughts on blending mythologies in your world building, borrowing aspects from Greek, African, South American, however many you want to create in your story? That's interesting. That's a good question. So I'll read that again. What are your thoughts on blending mythologies in your world building, borrowing aspects from Greek, African, South American, however many you want to create your story? I'll jump in real quick with this one. I tend to use a lot of mythologies from like Greek mythology. Where is it? Here's my Minotaur right in the front cover of book 1, and things like that. I thought those mythologies were fantastic. Does anybody, either Rob or Angelina, do you use any kind of like real world mythologies?
I haven't really, but I do make up my own occasionally, like I was saying. And as far as the question originally that they were asking about, how do you feel about it? I love it as a concept, although in this day and age, everybody gets butthurt about something. So I don't know, like it really depends on your audience, depends on who you're catering to. As long as you treat it with respect and cultural sensitivity, I don't see why you can't add that in. And then also at the end of the day, just tell anybody if they have an issue with it, say, well, I fictionalized it. It's my story. Sure, I took elements of it. It's not intended to be offensive or, you know, costumey or cheesy or whatever people might whine about, you know. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, with mine, there's really not much of, you know, at this point, barring aspects from those. But I would say that if you are looking to do it, if you are looking to blend, as long as you've done your homework, as long as you've got, you know, as long as you've gone through books, as long as you've read stuff up, as long as you made notes. I mean, just grabbing stuff just for grabbing's sake, it's gonna come back and bite you in the butt. So I would just recommend is that if you do blend stuff, as long as, you know, and Angelina kind of touched on it already, but and I mean, as long as you blend stuff, and as long as you actually you know, do your homework and make sure it's, you know, make sure it's close enough to the real thing, or, you know, spin it off as well, but just as long as you do your homework, because what you don't want is you don't want it showing up in reviews saying, you know, author did all this just because. It's you know, as long as it's you know, as long as it works towards the story, and as long as you've done your homework, and as long as you know what you're talking about, then use it. Sure.
Rosemary has a good question, so we'll try to answer that one for you. She says where she's read some books where they throw too much of the world all up front, and others where you have no idea what's going on because they give you very little. How do you know how much to start off with? That's a very good question.
Oh yeah, okay. I think it's a very subjective question and answer, but for me, I'll say I don't like books that are so heavy on description. I mean, I like, okay, a little bit to set it up, but you got to jump into the plot, make the reader have a reason to continue, make them see right from the get-go there's a problem, or there's a direction, or there's a purpose. Like, don't rattle on for 4 or 5 chapters about, you know, hills and cities and said, okay, but why do I care though? I would say pacing wise, you may want to not do too much of that at first. Maybe like a chapter of that, like 1 chapter or a preface or an introduction or something to show that it's just a setup and it's not the story. And then you dive right in to the plot. You have a reason, you have a motive, you have characters and flaws and issues. And that way the reader has a reason to read and not just like, well, there's hills in a city, but why do I care? Essentially. So that's what I would do anyway.
Yeah, she pretty much nailed it. I would say that, you know, dribble out the information. You can foreshadow stuff that's going to come up without actually showing them, you know, the whole show but not tell type of thing. I mean, you can tell up to a point and then you have to show. And as long as it's just enough to, you know, it goes back to the whole world building thing. Like, okay, there are other people in this story besides the protagonist. There are other people that are, you know, cause and effect. Okay, you know, this person has shown up. How is it going to affect these new people? Is it going to be, I just blanked on the word, but is it, you know, conflict? There we go. You know, as long as it's some sort of, you know, is it going to be a conflict? If it is, that's great. Then that means that gives them more to go. So it's like dribble the information. There's absolutely no need to go paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of text. Just don't.
Yeah, I like to have my characters get into situations and then you show the reader what's happening. I mean, there are some places where you need to explain a little bit, especially if it's like a situation where it's hard to let the character show what's going on. The author may have to say, okay, this is what the scene looks like, and then let the characters take it a step further. But yeah, you definitely don't want to give, you know, and it's a tough call. You don't want to give too much and you don't want to give too little. So it's a lot of editing that goes into it, a lot of reading. And one of the best things I can tell you is if you, the author, read your own story and you're getting lost and you can't understand or you can't see it in your head, then you need to fix it. And you got to bring it up that way. We have a good question, which goes to the writing process from Heather. And I know we all are in this situation. And it's a couple of questions there. Are there times when you get stuck or do not want to write? How do you push past these blocks? And do you have a schedule of writing daily, weekly, or a certain number of words? And how do you keep yourself on schedule? And what does that schedule look like? You know, how do you hold yourself accountable? So with all those questions in there, I'm going to ask Angelina and Rob, how do you write? And how do you keep on moving?
Oh man, this answer changes all the time. For me, in my head, I'm like, well, I don't want to force it because if I force the writing, it's going to come out as crap and I don't want to have to go back and fix it later. So I kind of give myself the grace and the space to say, if I'm not feeling it today, I don't have to write today. I can listen to music that's relevant. I can think about it in my brain and kind of daydream a little bit because that totally counts as planning. You can daydream and kind of play around with stuff. I have friends that love Pinterest boards and visual things that they put together. You can make graphics, you can make, like, there's so many fun ways to get your creativity going without actually touching your keyboard, which I think is great. So I do that. I mean, you can journal about it. I don't find that helpful myself, but some people swear by it. You can as far as scheduling, okay, this changes because right now I'm juggling freelancing and client work too. So I haven't been able to develop my focus as well as I typically can. But yeah, typically I'll say, let me try to get, like, I don't know, 5,000 words this week or something. Like, I don't really hold myself to that, but as a ballpark, or maybe I'll say, I want to get this first draft done by X date, whatever it is. And so I'll kind of just keep pushing forward. And sometimes I might write 5,000 words a day. Sometimes I write 800 words a day. I mean, it depends. So I think the key here is to listen to your brain and your timing and say, what part of the day am I most productive and focused? What part of the week am I most productive and focused? And what ways can I help myself kind of grow that creativity and not just squander it by forcing? And that's actually why I kind of hate NaNoWriMo, because, like, I know some people love it and no judging to them, but for me, I'm like, that will never work because I can't work that way. And I don't like the pressure, I don't like the stress, and I don't like it, like, at all. But if you like NaNoWriMo, you do that. No judgment here. I personally can't, though. There's just no way. So that's
What
why.
is that? Can you describe that?
Yeah, so National Novel Writing Month is that whole thing that's all over social media. Everybody is like, for the month of November, I'm going to write 50,000 words for my work in progress. And there's, like, online, like, word counters and fun little games, and you can brag about it. And that's all good and fine. But, like, I sit there and I'm like, if I did that, I would hate it. I would hate the process and it would probably sound like crap. So I'm not going to do that to myself because I am a type A personality. It would, like, destroy me if I force myself to do that. So, but some people need that extra push. And I think the team effort mentality is a powerful motivator too. So if you find that you're better working under that kind of pressure cooker, you do that. But it's not for me personally. So.
Yeah, generally for me, that's for trying to keep a schedule and all. I seem to have gotten down from, say, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock for time frame, and I like listening to background movie scores like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, stuff like that. So I've got about 5 days worth of a writing smart playlist that's just 5 days worth of listening to just music, and that's it. And it's not like rock and roll or anything like that, but it's just background music. And for me anyway, that's kind of how I start with that. From there, doing something menial like doing the dishes can sometimes spark creativity for me anyway. And so what happens is that I'll start off writing backstory or something like that, and then I start writing dialogue, and then I start writing the scenes in a couple of lines because it just sparks the creativity. As for trying to stay on deadline, I haven't really put myself on a deadline at all, which is probably a good thing because I wanted to do one book a year. Well, Weaver came out in 2018, and so far this is 2020. I've only got one book right now, so that kind of explains to you how well the writing's been going. But I think that as long as you give yourself some sort of deadline, or say, okay, I'm going to write so many words. I mean, as long as you write something. I mean, anything. The revisions are going to be like the first revision, second revision. They're all going to be crap to begin with. I think it was William Goldman said that any first draft is crap, and I'm editing for editing's sake. But as long as you can get that done, as long as you can, as long as you get some writing in, then it's so much the better.
Yeah, I always say, again, I'm the analytical side, so I'm going to write an outline, right? So I'll have this really big outline that goes from beginning to end and has all my major points and my subplots and my subpoints all the way down. And then what I do is I write from the one point to the next point, because I don't know, believe it or not, what's going to happen from point A to point B to point B to point C. That's where the fun part goes in. And then you can go on tangents and stuff. So it's a combination of the analytical side and the creativity side. But one rule of thumb I saw was, if you write, and I do this, and I teach these to the kids when I go to the schools, because they know the answer, and I think you guys will too. If you write 1 page a day, how many pages will you have by the end of the year? 365, right? A typical novel is 250 to 500 pages. So if you can average a page a day, then, you know, I don't write every day. Obviously, with the expo coming up, I've been preoccupied with this, making sure this goes on. But I might write 10, 12 pages one day, then nothing, then 2 pages, and 1 page. And as for schedules, I try to do a little bit in the morning and do a little bit at lunchtime when I can, and then on the weekends if time permits. But a lot of times the toughest part for me is just to get it out of your head, which is the first draft that anybody has. Just get it out of your head, get it on the computer, get it in. I use Microsoft Word, use whatever you want, just get it out. And then I'm one of those crazy people. I love the editing process, because now I actually have something to work with. So before a sculptor has a lump of clay to work with, he has to get the lump of clay. Okay, so I don't have anything. Well, I have it in my head, but who knows what else is up there. So you need to dump that out and get it onto your paper. And then, like Rob said, I never let anybody read my first draft. You'll be lucky if you read some snippets, because it's pure garbage. But when you start putting it together and you look at your outlines and your timelines, then you can start seeing how it's going to go. And you look at your characters. Are they developing? Do they attain? And then you got all those things going forward. So that's what I would say, how you do it. And I think writing an outline really helps with writer's block, because if you have an outline that goes from beginning to end with all your points and subpoints, then you know where you're going, and you can always amend that. You know, it's not, once you write it, it's fixed, you know, in stone. You can amend that to make it flow better, and you'll be really surprised. It actually works for me. I don't know how it does for the pantsers, but it works for me, and I usually get through my writer's block that way.
The reason I typically don't outline in that way is because I worry that my type A personality will become too rigid and I won't be able to think of like fun new twists. So the reason I pants is because I want to open up new opportunities for crazy twists and stuff. But I see how that works for you, and that makes perfect sense too. So at the end of the day, you got to just figure out what you like doing. That's the only answer there is, really. So
well, you could plan the outline and then pants the chapters. So that's kind of like
well,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's kind of what I do. I got the outline all set up, and then I write from point A to point B. And I don't know, like I could say my main character is Harrison. Harrison needs to meet, you know, in this chapter, he's going to go from going into the forest to getting to the temple. Okay, well, you're not going to say, oh, he took 50 steps and got to the temple. No, he's got to get there. I don't know what's going to happen within them. Maybe there's something that pops up, maybe something to drive the storyline a little bit. So you just kind of keep flowing it that way. So the outline is my analytical side where I plot, and then I pants my way to the next point.
So you're a planter, is what I've heard.
Yeah. Maybe we got ourselves a new term. I think we should start looking at that. A planter. I like that.
Well,
I heard it somewhere, yeah.
I like
Yeah, I heard it too.
both made to be broken. Like you can have an outline, and then as you go into, so I'm an outliner too. I have, I do an outline for, I'm an outliner or whatever. So that's the plan, but as you're writing, the plan changes. And when the plan changes, then you go back and you redo your outline. So, and that's one of the things that can keep you from having writer's block, but it could also cause you to have writer's block. But the good thing is like, if I just need to change one paragraph in my notes for that whole chapter, instead of writing the whole 15 or 20 pages, and then having to go through and change that again because of something that happened earlier, you know, granted, most people write sequentially anyways, but sometimes I throw a chapter at the end that I want to write because I'm really into it. Or like, you know, RK said, I'm doing the dishes and I think of something really cool. I'm like, oh, I need to write this chapter now. So then I go back and I fill in the gaps between there. And sometimes that stuff can change. So.
I do the same thing, but I let my characters tell me what they would do. If you have well-developed characters, they will say, that's not what I would do. What are you thinking?
Right, exactly.
And my characters definitely talk to me.
And outlines change just like schedules. So I think schedules are good because if you say your goal is to write 5,000 words a day, right? And you only do 3,000 words a day. Well, guess what? At least you're 3,000 words more into it than you were if you decided to just, sit on the couch and watch movies all day anyways. It's a goal, but you don't have to really, as far as what I do is I have my goals, but I don't worry if I don't meet those goals. As long as I approach the goals, I'm happy because it shows progress. And that's the thing. Just, writer's block is when you have no progress. And as long as you keep having progress, you're good to go. And like Angelina was saying, progress could be not actually physically sitting down and hitting the keys. It could be just mentally figuring out what's gonna happen. Like Christine said, sometimes, okay, my character's telling me something different than I had planned. I can work on that in my head before I get it down on paper. You're still working and creating when you do stuff like that. So,
yep. We probably have time for one last question. Believe it or not, we only got 4 more minutes, and I have a session at 1. So let's see. This is from Rosemary. She asked, with all the outlines and charts, do you also write a separate description for each chapter?
Well, I personally don't, but again, I'm kind of a pantser, so I'm not the best person to ask, but I'm sure Mike and RK might have some interesting input on that. So.
I'll feel this one. No, I don't. What I usually do is I try to find when I'm writing, like I said, I do have my outline, and as I'm writing, I guess you kind of run into a logical breaking point. So I can't, I don't write one huge novel in 800 pages in one document. I do one chapter at a time as its own individual Microsoft Word file. So, yeah.
It was character, not chapter.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. With all, do you also write?
Sorry, did I spell it wrong?
No, I just saw CHA real quick because I'm looking both. Well, okay. Do you guys write separate character sheets and stuff like that?
I haven't really. Go ahead.
Actually, that brings up something good regarding commissions and artists. What's happened is that once I wrote Weaver, I found an artist to do some commissions for the characters, and so writing them in the novel is one thing, because you don't need to get that nitpicky about it. I mean, you could, but I don't personally. It's like, okay, the character's name and a brief little description of, so at least you can see them in their heads. And then for the commission, on the other hand, it's like you have to, okay, the character's name, how tall they are, the color of their hair, what are they wearing, blah, blah, blah. And it's a completely different going from just the novel writing to now, okay, now you have to actually describe them to a certain extent, and the artist will take liberties and stuff like that and whatever, but it's like as long as they're close enough. And so it's that, so for characters, different, for character sheets, yeah, I've done it, and it's turned out good.
Very good. Well, we only have a couple of minutes, so what I'd like to do now is allow Angelina and Rob to say where they can buy their books and things like that. So we're going to wrap this up. Unfortunately, we do have a whole day's worth of events. So Angelina, you're up first.
Yeah, sure. So my books are available on Amazon. They're in audio too on Audible. So check those out. Awesome voice actors I worked with. I love doing that. You can get them from me too. If you follow my pages, you can DM me and say you want a signed copy. And then I have like Venmo and PayPal available too. So yeah, there's a link in the comments. If you scroll way up, I posted it like a little while ago. If not, just follow me. All my books are just under my name, Angelina Singer, on Amazon and Kindle and all that good stuff. So thank you for being here and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Rob?
And yeah, I essentially did the same thing. So if you scroll all the way up, but anyway, it's rkbrights.com, and there's a menu bar there that'll show you where to find the books. I'm RK Bentley on Twitter, RK Bentley Author on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram as well. But generally, rkbrights.com will definitely give you all the information. There is actually a post. It's rkbrights.com/books. And that'll give you all of the listings. It's locally available at Stillwater Books in Pawtucket, Books on the Square in Providence, and Inkfish Books in Warren.
Very good. And I actually have, if you go back to the Grenadine site and you go under my name, there's a file that says contact files. You can download that. That has all my information. And I put my link for my website in the chat. And I can actually see if this works.
Oh, I have my books at Stillwater Press also. Was reminded by Rob saying that. So
Yeah.
if you guys are in Pawtucket, I know Steve Porter has my books on hand too. So check those out.
And I just shared my information over there on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, but you can use that. And there's all my social networks and stuff like that. So I want to thank everybody for joining in. We had quite a few people. And Heather from Hawaii, thank you for getting up early. That's fantastic. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. And really, we got so many more things going on. I actually have a session at 1, at 2, and at 3. The next session is going to be talking about building your author platform, which is going to be talking about a lot of social networking and websites and stuff like that. And I know Angelina and Rob have more things to do with coffee clatches and other sessions. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I think everybody's got that. And like I said, thanks for coming on and enjoy the rest of the expo. Go see other people's things and join in.
Thank you so much. This was great.
I hope we helped everybody out. Everybody's going to be a writer now.
Hope so.
Have a good day, everybody.